This woman actually tried to sue me because I refused to join her bogus HOA. I couldn't believe I'd $25,000. That's what she demanded from me, all because I wouldn't fork over some absurd monthly fees. I was angry, shocked, and completely overwhelmed. Who does that? Trying to rob someone blind with fake documents and threats? But her greed led her to make one fatal miscalculation. She assumed a small-town mechanic like me would be an easy win in court. What she didn't expect was that karma had been keeping tabs on justice. Well, it has a wicked sense of humor. When the truth finally came out, the courtroom exploded like something straight out of a movie. This is the story of how I got revenge. Drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. At the time, I was living a pretty laid-back life in Austin, Texas. I owned a modest little garage at Collins Auto Shop, and nothing flashy, just a place where I worked on cars and helped regular people stay on the road. I loved that shop, the scent of oil, the thrill of reviving an engine that everyone else had given up on, and the customers who'd become more like family. It was everything I wanted. Life was calm, drama-free, and exactly the way I liked it. I had intentionally bought a house in a neighborhood that had no HOA. I've never liked those things. Why would I want some stranger telling me what color I can paint my mailbox? But my peaceful routine was about to be shattered by a woman who made money by ruining other people's lives. It all started on a Tuesday morning in March. I was under the hood of a beautiful 1972 Camaro when I heard several car doors slam outside. That wasn't too out of the ordinary. Customers came and went all day. But then I heard stern, official-sounding voices, sharp, professional, and nothing like the usual chatter around my place. My gut instantly told me something wasn't right. I wiped the grease off my hands and walked outside. What I saw stopped me cold. There was a woman in a sharp business suit standing in front of my shop, flanked by 3 others. Each of them had clipboards and expressions like they owned the whole block. The woman in the lead had this icy, calculated look in her eyes that immediately made every alarm in my brain go off. "Are you David Collins?" she asked, her voice cold enough to freeze fire. I nodded, and she smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that means hello. It was more like the grin you'd see on a predator closing in on prey. "I'm Brenda Walsh, president of the Pine Valley Community Association," she said. "You currently owe $2,400 in unpaid HOA dues. I'm here to collect." I felt like the world just slammed on the brakes. HOA dues? I bought this house specifically because it didn't have an HOA. That was a major reason I signed the papers in the first place. I tried to explain there must be a mistake here, that no such association existed here, but Brenda laughed, like I just said the punchline to a joke, only she understood. "Denial doesn't change legal facts," she said smugly. "The records show you owe us, and that payment is due now." Before I could respond, her crew sprang into action like a SWAT team executing a raid. They started snapping photos of everything in my garage door, my mailbox, even the tiny American flag I had hanging near my front steps. One guy pulled out a ruler and started measuring the length of my grass, shaking his head like I'd committed a felony. Another was scribbling violations onto official-looking forms. The third was inspecting my trash cans, claiming they were out of compliance with community standards. It was completely surreal. I kept trying to explain there was no HOA, but they treated me like I was lying or delusional. Then Brenda hit me with the real kicker, the part that made my heart sink. "You have 48 hours to pay the $2,400, she said coolly, plus a $300 late fee. If it's not received by Thursday at 5 p.m., we'll begin legal steps to seize your property." She said it as casually as if she were reading off a grocery list, but I could see it in her eyes as she was enjoying every second of this. This wasn't business to her, this was a power trip, and it scared me. But she wasn't done. "We'll also be reporting your business for license violations," she added, "and filing complaints about multiple code infractions with the city." Every single word was meant to make me panic. And, to be honest, it was working. But then, instinct kicked in. I pulled out my phone and quietly started recording everything. Brenda was so wrapped up in her little performance, she didn't even notice. She kept rattling off legal jargon and nonsense about bylaws while her people continued the so-called inspection. When I asked to see some kind of proof, actual documents that showed this HOA existed, she brushed me off like I wasn't worth her time. "All records are on file with the county," she said, not even looking up. If you doubt our authority, feel free to check for yourself. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get any crazier, my neighbor Ethel Murphy came walking over from across the street. Ethel, who's 71 and sweet as sugar, had lived in our neighborhood longer than anyone else. When she saw the scene unfolding, her face turned pale. "Oh, David," she whispered. "That woman's been going door to door on this street." Brenda gave her a death glare, but Ethel wasn't backing down. "She came to my house yesterday, tried to get $800 from me too." That's when I knew without a doubt something was way off. If this hoe were real, why were people just now hearing about it? And why were the amounts different? After Brenda and her group finally left, promising to return in 48 hours for payment, I rushed back inside and hit the internet like my life depended on it. Within 15 minutes, I had all the confirmation I needed. There was no Pine Valley Community Association listed anywhere in Texas, no business registration, no filings, no record at all. The website she mentioned, created just 1 month earlier. According to the domain info, it was all fake. Every part of it. I was dealing with a skilled scammer, someone who had turned this hustle into a well-oiled machine, and what I uncovered next about that notice would blow the whole thing wide open. The next morning, I woke up to find a bright orange notice glued to my garage door, not taped, glued. It even caused paint damage where they'd scraped the old adhesive off just to make it stick better. My hands were shaking as I read it. Final notice, property lien filed, immediate payment required. This situation was snowballing fast, and I realized I had to act before it got completely out of control. I knew I needed help and fast. So, like any rational person would, I called the police. Big mistake. The officer who answered sounded like he was half asleep. "Sir, this sounds like a civil issue. Unless there's evidence of a crime in progress, we can't get involved in disputes between homeowners and hoes." I tried to explain that this hoe didn't even exist, that it was a complete fabrication, but he just sighed like I was wasting his time. "You'll have to take it up in court. Good luck," he said, and hung up. Next stop, City Hall. I figured someone there had to care that a scammer was going house to house, pretending to run a fake hoe. Surely that would get some attention, right? Wrong again. I was bounced around from department to department like nobody wanted to deal with it. Code enforcement told me they'd investigate but had a 3-week backlog, 2 to 3 weeks. By then, Brenda could have drained the whole neighborhood. The business licensing office said it wasn't their responsibility, they only handled real licenses, not fraudulent ones. When I tried the mayor's office, the call went straight to voicemail, which was full. The line cut off after 1 ring. By lunchtime, I'd called 8 different government offices and had gotten nowhere. It felt like the system was built to protect the scammers, not the people being scammed. And Brenda, she wasn't wasting any time. That very afternoon, some guy showed up at my shop claiming to be a city inspector. He demanded to see my business license and insurance paperwork. From the moment he spoke, something felt off. When I asked to see his ID, his tone instantly turned aggressive. He started barking threats, saying he'd shut me down immediately if I didn't comply. His uniform looked cheap, his badge like something from a Halloween costume, and he kept glancing nervously at his phone like he was waiting for someone to tell him what to say next. I told him I wouldn't show him anything until I confirmed who he was. He stormed off, muttering something about violations and operating illegally. I called the city to verify his visit. Guess what? No inspectors were scheduled in my area that day. That evening, the harassment took a new turn: psychological warfare. My phone started blowing up. Brenda had started calling my customers. She told Mrs. Henderson, who had been coming to me for over a decade, that my business was under investigation and might be shut down. She contacted the Johnsons and claimed there were safety concerns about work done at my shop. By the end of the day, 3 customers had canceled their appointments. 2 more called, worried about what they'd heard. This wasn't just a scam anymore. Yeah, this woman was trying to obliterate my livelihood, destroy my reputation, and tear down everything I had built. And the worst part? She was doing it all under the guise of professionalism. Every piece of it looked legit. The violation notices were printed on sleek letterhead with seals and legal-looking fonts. The fake inspector had a uniform that almost passed Brenda's business cards looked like they came straight from a corporate boardroom. Even her website, which I knew was fake, was polished, with stock images and slick legal language. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed it myself, which made me wonder how many people already had. How many families had caved under the pressure and handed over thousands of dollars just to make it stop. The thought made me feel sick. That's when Ethel showed up again with information that chilled me to the bone. She'd been talking to other neighbors, doing her own digging. What she uncovered was horrifying. The Johnson family, just 2 streets over, had given Brenda $4,500 3 months ago. They'd suffered the same fake citations, threatening phone calls, and sudden inspections. When the stress got too much, they paid here thinking it would end. But it didn't. Brenda didn't leave. She just moved on to the next street and started the whole scam all over again. Ethel had also found an elderly couple who had paid $3,200 and a single mom with 2 kids who had scraped together $1,800. Brenda was running a well-oiled corner and I was her latest mark. But I had one advantage none of the others did. I had recorded everything. Every conversation, every phone call, every threat. I had a library of evidence sitting right on my phone. And then came the moment she slipped up. During one particularly furious call, Brenda lost her cool and revealed her hand completely. I'll never forget what she said. "Look, I don't care if it's real or not. You're going to pay me, or I'll ruin your life. I've done this before. I know how to make things hell for people like you." There it was, a full-on confession, clear as day, recorded in high quality. She admitted the whole thing was fake and that she had done this to other innocent people. I had her, no doubt, but now I needed to figure out how to use this bombshell properly. Then came the final escalation, the one that changed everything. The next morning, Brenda showed up at my shop holding what looked like official court documents. It was a lawsuit. She was demanding $25,000 in damages, legal fees, and penalties for supposedly violating community standards. The paperwork looked real: case numbers, legal stamps, even embossed seals. For a second, my stomach dropped, because even if it was all fake, I still had to respond in court. If I didn't, I could lose automatically. And hiring a lawyer to fight a phony lawsuit, that would cost me thousands of money I didn't have. It was brilliant. In the most twisted way. She was using the court system itself as a weapon, forcing victims to choose between paying up or getting dragged into expensive legal battles. But what Brenda didn't know was that by serving those papers, she had just made the biggest mistake of her criminal career. Would she realize the colossal mistake she'd made before it all came crashing down? The legal battle was just beginning and it would shake her entire operation. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from, because I was going to need every ounce of support to get through what came next. The next morning, I woke up to a thick packet of legal paperwork at 20 pages full of dense legal language and threats. Brenda was officially suing me for $25,000 in damages and legal fees. As I started reading through the complaint, my heart sank. According to her claims, I had violated numerous community standards, damaged property values, and even caused emotional trauma to the supposed residents. It was all pure fiction, fabricated from start to finish, but the documents looked alarmingly real. Every paragraph was dripping with intimidating legal jargon I barely understood. The numbers kept climbing with each page: late fees, administrative costs, compliance penalties. Brenda had thought of everything, but the scariest part wasn't the dollar amount, it was the deadline. I had 30 days to respond formally, legally, or I'd lose by default. My home, my business, everything. That weekend, I started calling lawyers, and let me tell you, it was one of the most demoralizing weekends of my life. The lowest quote I got was $5,000 just to get started, with no guarantees on total cost. These kinds of cases can drag on for months. One lawyer told me over the phone, "You're looking at 15 to 20 grand at the minimum if things go smoothly." $20,000. I didn't have it. My entire savings account barely hit $8,000, and that was supposed to be for emergencies. It hit me like a punch in the gut. This whole scheme was engineered to bleed people dry before they ever saw a courtroom. Brenda knew most people couldn't afford to fight back, so they'd just cave. But not me. That's when I made a decision that changed everything. I would represent myself. Yeah, I know what people say about that. A man who represents himself has a fool for a client. But what other option did I have? I couldn't afford a lawyer, I couldn't afford to do nothing, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let her take everything I'd worked for without putting up a fight. I drove to the public library and checked out every book I could find on civil litigation. I watched hours of online tutorials, learning everything from filing procedures to courtroom decorum. I buried myself in legal terminology, case precedents, discovery roulette, you name it. I was determined to learn the language of justice. If Brenda wanted a legal war, I was going to give her one. And thank God for Ethel during this storm. When I told her I was going to represent myself, she didn't flinch. Sweetheart, she said, I spent 40 years buried in office paperwork and dealing with red tape. I know how to make files look like they belong on a judge's desk. Together, we turned my garage into a legal headquarters. We sorted and labeled every violation notice, cataloged recordings of threatening phone calls, and built a photo archive of all the property damage. Ethel helped me build a timeline of harassment and even played mock judge while I practiced presenting my case. The deeper we dug into Brenda's operation, the more elaborate it became. Her fake HOA had detailed bylaws, fabricated meeting minutes, and even made up a board of directors. All of it fake but polished enough to pass as real. She built a paper empire of deception. When I filed formal discovery requests demanding proof of the HOA's legitimacy, Brenda responded with a 3-inch thick binder filled with fake documents. The amount of effort she put into this illusion was almost impressive. But I wasn't alone anymore. Through quiet networking, I tracked down other victims. The Johnson family, the ones Ethel had mentioned, were beyond relieved to hear someone was taking a stand. We paid her because we were terrified, Mrs. Johnson told me, choking back tears. She made it sound like we'd lose our home if we didn't comply. Then there were the Petersons, an elderly couple who dipped into their retirement savings to pay Brenda's demands. That money was meant for their grandkids. When I played Brenda's recorded threat for them, Mr. Peterson broke down in tears. We knew something felt wrong, he whispered, but we were scared. And just like that, a movement began. Word spread through the neighborhood. People who had been too afraid to speak up started coming forward. Mrs. Rodriguez showed me fake violation notices about her flower garden being non-compliant. The Williams family had been threatened over their unapproved mailbox design. Even neighbors who hadn't been directly targeted were furious once they found out what was going on. Many of them offered to help. Some volunteered as witnesses, others gathered documentation, and a few even offered to testify about what they'd seen. It felt like the community was finally waking up, and I wasn't standing alone anymore. The biggest breakthrough came from the discovery process. In civil cases, both parties are required to exchange evidence. I had demanded everything related to the so-called Pine Valley Community Association. What came back was both hilarious and devastating. The HOA charter was clearly typed up on a home computer and printed on cheap copy paper. The bylaws were full of typos and contradicting clauses. Meeting records listed dates when the board members who didn't even exist were supposedly meeting while being out of state. Even the bank records exposed the scam. The HOA account had only been opened 6 weeks before Brenda came after me, completely destroying her claim that it was a long-established organization. Then came the moment that changed the whole tone of the case. I found out my case had been assigned to Judge Diana Stone, and when Brenda's lawyer heard her name, I swear he paled. "Judge Stone?" he muttered. Word around town was that she had a reputation for tearing fraudsters to pieces. She doesn't tolerate scammers who waste the court's time. Someone warned me. But if you're telling the truth, you've got the best judge in the state. The more I researched her, the more confident I felt. Then Brenda's lawyer approached me with a quiet offer to settle. "My client is willing to drop all claims if you agree not to pursue counteraction," he said. Translation: Brenda was scared. She wanted to disappear before she had to answer for everything. But I wasn't going to let her walk away that easily. "This isn't just about me," I told him. "It's about every family she's hurt and the ones she'll go after next if no one stops her." No deal. We're going to court. In the final days leading up to trial, I went all in on organizing my case. I had her on record admitting the HOA was fake. I had piles of fraudulent documents. I had testimony from victims who'd been through the same nightmare. Most importantly, I had the truth, and I was finally ready to fight. David had unknowingly captured something on tape that would completely shatter Brenda's world. But before that revelation came to light, she was about to play her most dangerous card yet. When I first learned that my case had been assigned to Judge Diana Stone, I had no clue what kind of storm I was walking into. But once I started digging into her history, I realized I'd hit the jackpot. Judge Stone wasn't just another name on the bench, she was a legend in legal circles. Her sharp tongue and zero patience for manipulation made her infamous. Lawyers whispered stories about her like cautionary tales. She was dubbed the roasting judge because of her unmatched ability to verbally dismantle liars and scammers right there in court. There were tales of criminals breaking down in tears under her questioning, and attorneys who would have preferred anyone else on the bench. With 15 years of experience in fraud cases, her no-nonsense approach and dramatic flair made her the exact force I needed on my side. As word of my case began circulating, it caught fire in the community. People were thrilled that someone was finally taking a stand against Brenda and her schemes. My loyal customers started spreading the word. Neighbors told their neighbors, and before long, strangers were dropping by my shop just to show their support. Some brought coffee and donuts, others volunteered as character witnesses. A few even offered to chip in for my legal expenses. An older gentleman came in one day and mentioned his grandson was in law school. He offered to help go through my case files for free. "What she's doing is wicked," he said firmly, "and someone needs to stop her before she ruins more lives." Their support gave me strength I never knew I had. But Brenda wasn't about to sit back quietly. She used her stolen money to hire a local attorney who began pushing a counter-narrative. He released a statement to local media accusing me of being a problematic neighbor who refused to follow community guidelines and was harassing dedicated HOA officials. The smear campaign was laughably transparent, but it proved Brenda knew how important it was to shape public opinion. She was trying to play the victim while painting me as a rogue resident ignoring the rules. Thankfully, people weren't buying it. The community already knew who she really was, and her attempt to rewrite the story completely fell apart. The day I stepped into Judge Stone's courtroom for our first hearing, I was beyond nervous. The room was packed clearly. This case had become the talk of the town. As soon as Judge Stone entered, the atmosphere shifted. Her presence was powerful, commanding instant respect. Probably in her late 40s, with eyes sharp enough to cut through lies, she projected authority with every word she spoke. "This case involves alleged HOA violations," she began, locking eyes with Brenda, already wearing a look of deep skepticism. "I'm eager to see the documents supporting these allegations." She wasted no time. The moment Brenda's lawyer handed over the fabricated HOA charter, she held it to the light and inspected it with a faint smile. "Counselor," she said, amusement dancing on her lips, "was this printed on standard copy paper from someone's home printer?" The attorney tried to dodge by claiming the format was irrelevant, but she shut him down with a steely glare. "No," she said coolly, "but competence certainly is." That remark earned a quiet laugh from the courtroom. I watched Brenda flush with embarrassment. When it was finally my turn to speak, my nerves were on fire, but I'd rehearsed my presentation again and again with Ethel's help. I laid out the entire sequence of events, highlighting every instance of harassment. I played Brenda's own recordings where she admitted the HOA wasn't real and exposed the contradictions in her fake documents. Judge Stone followed every word, asking sharp, insightful questions that proved she wasn't missing a single detail. When I played the clip where Brenda flatly said, "I don't care if it's real or not," the entire courtroom fell silent. You could hear a pin drop. The judge raised her eyebrows, turning to Brenda with a look that said, "Are you serious right now?" It was like watching a slow-motion wreck. Every fraudulent document Brenda submitted only made her case fall further apart. Judge Stone went over them like a forensic analyst, pointing out flaws and impossibilities one by one. "Miss Walsh," she said at one point, holding up a document, "these minutes claim your board held a meeting on February 29 last year. However, last February only had 28 days. Care to explain how your HOA pulled off a meeting on a non-existent date?" Brenda's lawyer looked like he wished he could vanish. The turning point came when Judge Stone turned the spotlight on the HOA's legal status. "Counselor," she asked, directing her question to the now clearly flustered attorney, "do you have the incorporation documents for this HOA on file with the state?" He fumbled through his folder, clearly stalling, then admitted he didn't have them. "Well then," she said with an ominous smile, "can you at least tell me when this organization was officially established?" More frantic paper rustling, more awkward silence. Finally, he muttered, "Your Honor, we're still collecting some of the historical records." Judge Stone leaned back slowly, clearly amused. "I see," she said, her tone edged with warning. "Then we'll be holding a full evidentiary hearing to examine all these documents properly." A broken bar under oath. The way she emphasized under oath sent a chill through the room. A chill ran down everyone's spine, especially Brenda. When Judge Stone announced that a comprehensive hearing would take place the following week, she declared that every allegation and document submitted would be scrutinized in full detail. "I want to examine every piece of evidence," she stated with authority, "and I expect thorough explanations for any discrepancies we uncover." As we exited the courtroom, the tension in the air was thick. Brenda was visibly shaken, whispering in a panic to her attorney, who now looked like he just realized he'd stepped into something far messier than anticipated. For the first time in this entire ordeal, I felt a glimmer of hope. Judge Stone had pegged Brenda right from the start, and I was eager to see how she'd hold up when forced to defend her lies under oath. What Brenda didn't know was that Judge Stone had spent her entire career waiting for a case like this, and she was about to leave her mark. The day of the evidentiary hearing finally arrived, and I'd never seen a courthouse so packed. It was standing room only. People were crammed into the hallway, trying to catch a glimpse of the showdown. Word had spread across the city like wildfire. Local news teams were posted outside, and reporters from regional papers had also shown up. The community knew this was going to be a battle worth witnessing, a David versus Goliath, presided over by a judge known for delivering justice with flair. Walking into the courtroom, holding my meticulously organized folders, I felt the weight of the moment. Judge Stone entered with her usual commanding presence, but there was an extra sharpness in her eyes that day. "We're here to examine serious allegations of fraud, extortion, and harassment," she announced to the crowded room. "I expect full transparency. Lying under oath is a felony in this state, and I do not tolerate it in my courtroom." She delivered those words while staring straight at Brenda, and the message was crystal clear. She wasn't buying the act. Brenda, sitting at her table, tried to appear composed, but her trembling hands betrayed her. When my name was called, I felt surprisingly composed. All the preparation with Ethel had paid off. I presented my evidence step by step in precise chronological order. The highlight, a recording of Brenda confessing that the HOA was entirely bogus. The room went silent as her voice echoed from the speakers. "Listen, I don't care if it's real or not. You're going to pay me, or I'll ruin your life." Gasps and murmurs swept through the audience. Judge Stone remained expressionless, but I saw her jotting down notes. Once the recording stopped, she turned to Brenda and said with interest, "Ms. Walsh, I'm very curious to hear your explanation for that statement." Then came the part I'd been waiting for, dismantling Brenda's forged documents. I had laid them side by side with authentic HOA documents from real neighborhoods, and the contrast was undeniable. Judge Stone combed through each item like a forensic expert, spotting contradictions even I hadn't caught. "This certificate of incorporation shows a filing date of March 15th, she pointed out, "yet these meeting minutes show your board convened in February." "Miss Walsh, how exactly does an non-existent organization hold meetings before it legally exists?" Brenda's lawyer scrambled to chalk it up to clerical mistakes, but Judge Stone wasn't buying it. "These aren't clerical errors. This is coordinated document fabrication." Then came the victim testimonies, and they were devastating. Mrs. Johnson took the stand first and recounted, voice trembling, how Brenda harassed her family for 2 straight weeks. "She called every day," Mrs. Johnson said tearfully, "threatening lawsuits, property seizure. Said we'd lose everything if we didn't pay up. In the end, they'd used up their emergency savings just to get her off their backs." Then the elderly Peterson couple testified, telling how Brenda's lies had forced them to dip into their retirement fund. We worked our entire lives to save that money, Mr. Peterson said, his voice cracking. And she stole it from USA with threats and deception. But the true drama unfolded when Judge Stone began live fact-checking every single claim Brenda had made. Her assistant verified each item against official databases, and one by one, Brenda's story crumbled. "Miss Walsh," Judge Stone said, visibly satisfied, "my assistant has completed a thorough search of all state databases. There is no record of a business called Pine Valley Community Association anywhere." Brenda's lawyer stood up, objecting that they needed more time to gather records, but Judge Stone shut him down instantly. "Counselor," she snapped, "your client has had months to prepare. If the documents don't exist, it's because the organization never existed." Brenda's entire mountain of fake paperwork collapsed in real time. Every bylaw she submitted was riddled with typos or outright legal nonsense. Meeting minutes referenced events that couldn't have happened when they claimed. Financial records revealed accounts opened just weeks before her harassment campaign began. Judge Stone tore through them one by one, her remarks growing more biting as the lies unraveled. Holding up one fake bylaw, she read, "This clause requires proper landscaping." Then she raised an eyebrow. Did anyone even spell check this before it was supposedly passed? The gallery nearly burst with quiet laughter. By now, the courtroom echoed with stifled laughter, and Brenda's face had turned an alarming shade of red. What truly crushed any remaining hope she had was the financial proof. "My investigation had unearthed a clear trail. Brenda had swindled over $50,000 from local families through this same fraudulent scheme. The bank records matched the payment dates of her victims to a T." When Judge Stone reviewed the documents, her expression shifted from mildly entertained to visibly furious. "Miss Walsh," she said, her tone sharp and direct, "are you genuinely asking this court to believe you collected $50,000 from residents on behalf of an entity that doesn't legally exist?" The question hit like a hammer. You could see Brenda's composure crumbling as the weight of the evidence surrounded her. Her attorney scrambled to contain the fallout, but the damage was irreversible. Every piece of paperwork was forged, every statement disproven, and each victim's account painted the same clear picture of relentless harassment and manipulation. Then Judge Stone turned directly to Brenda. "Miss Walsh," she said, leaning forward, "you will now take the witness stand and explain under oath exactly what this so-called organization has been doing." The look on Brenda's face was unforgettably pure panic. When court resumed after the break, Brenda was called to testify. The air inside the courtroom was electric. Everyone sensed that the moment of truth had arrived. Would she keep up the fight till the Section 8, or finally break under the pressure? As she raised her right hand and took the oath, I couldn't help but think a truth was probably an entirely foreign concept to this woman. The earlier warning about perjury still lingered like a storm cloud over the room. Brenda's hand shook slightly as she sat down. Her lawyer had likely drilled her with talking points, but even the best coaching can't salvage a story made entirely of lies. Judge Stone started off with what should have been basic questions. "Miss Walsh, when was the Pine Valley Community Association officially incorporated as a business?" Brenda answered quickly, with forced confidence. "In early 2022, in the state of Delaware, Your Honor." But Judge Stone was more than prepared. "That's interesting, Miss Walsh. My staff has already confirmed that no such organization exists in Delaware's corporate records. Would you like to revise your answer?" Brenda's fake confidence drained away like water from a sinking ship. "A broken bar might still be processing through the system," she mumbled weakly, a flimsy excuse considering it was already well into 2024. What followed was like watching a precision takedown. Judge Stone began dismantling Brenda's story piece by piece, exposing every falsehood with calm, surgical precision. "Miss Walsh, you claimed Mr. Collins violated landscaping guidelines. Can you show me where those standards are written in your bylaws?" Brenda nervously flipped through her stack of papers, then pointed to a section only for the judge to immediately find a contradiction. "This clause says grass must be kept between 2 and 4 inches, but this other one says 1 to 3. Which rule did Mr. Collins allegedly break?" The gallery was on the edge of their seats, whispering, gasping, hanging on every word as Brenda's lies unraveled before them. Judge Stone pressed on, never flustered, her voice calm but relentless. "These meeting minutes indicate a board vote on February 29th last year, but last February only had 28 days. Can you explain that?" Brenda tried to claim it was just a typo, but Judge Stone continued, "I've counted 17 different meetings listed on dates that don't exist. Are they all typos?" Then came the serious accusations of harassment and threats. "Miss Walsh," the judge said, "multiple witnesses testified that you threatened them with lawsuits and property seizure if they didn't pay immediately. Is that true?" Brenda, astonishingly, denied it. "I never threatened anyone. I simply informed them of their legal responsibilities under our community standards." That's when Judge Stone played audio from my recorded calls of Brenda's own voice, unmistakable, issuing threats and making veiled demands. Her expression as she heard herself on tape, shock, panic, and utter disbelief was nothing short of theatrical. But it didn't stop there. As Judge Stone caught Brenda in each contradiction, Brenda would spin a new light to cover the last, digging herself deeper into a web she couldn't escape. "Miss Walsh," the judge continued, "you testified that you didn't collect money. But these bank records show deposits that perfectly match when your so-called dues were paid. How do you explain that?" Brenda stammered that the money was for legitimate administrative services. "Such as?" the judge asked. "We provided community coordination and oversight," she said vaguely. Judge Stone pounced. "What does a community coordination mean for an organization that legally doesn't exist?" The room erupted with quiet murmurs. It was a masterclass in exposing fraud, and everyone in that courtroom knew it. Every person in the courtroom was sitting forward in their seat, completely absorbed in the verbal duel unfolding before them. Many in the audience were shaking their heads in disbelief at Brenda's sheer nerve, and some couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of her explanations. Judge Stone's razor-sharp wit was on full display as she methodically tore Brenda's claims to pieces. "Mrs. Walsh," the judge said dryly, "you assert this organization has served the community for years. Yet your bank account was opened 6 weeks ago, your website registered 5 weeks ago, and no official business record of your organization exists anywhere. Are you asking this court to believe you've been operating without a bank account, website, or legal status for several years?" Brenda was clearly unraveling. Beads of sweat formed on her forehead. Her voice rose an octave with each reply, and she kept glancing toward her attorney, who wisely avoided making any objections. He understood that intervening would only draw more attention to the disaster unfolding. Brenda, without realizing it, was digging herself deeper with every answer. "Miss Walsh," Judge Stone pressed on, her tone brimming with deliberate calm, "you testified that your HOA holds regular board meetings. Please, name your board members." Brenda quickly listed several names, trying to sound confident. Judge Stone gave a nod, and her assistant promptly began fact-checking the information. "How curious," Judge Stone mused after a short pause. "2 of the individuals you named have been deceased for over 3 years. Are you suggesting this HOA is being run by the dead?" That comment landed like a bomb. It was the tipping point of Brenda's unraveling, but the moment that truly sealed her fate came next. "Miss Walsh," the judge said, leaning forward slightly, "I will ask you this directly. Have you ever told anyone that this homeowners association isn't legitimate?" All eyes were on Brenda. She had one final chance to come clean or lie under oath. Predictably, she couldn't let go of her ego. "Absolutely not, Your Honor," she said with a defiant tilt of her chin. "I would never say such a thing because this HOA is entirely legitimate." Judge Stone's smile in that moment sent chills down everyone's spine. "Well then," she said, reaching for the audio recorder on her bench, "Ms. Walsh, I'm now going to play a legally obtained recording submitted into evidence." Brenda froze. Her face drained of all color as the reality of what was about to happen crashed down on her. She had just committed perjury, and the proof was moments away from being played aloud. The judge's finger hovered over the play button as the courtroom fell utterly silent. What followed would go down in legal history. The recording clicked on. Brenda's voice, unmistakable and clear, echoed through the courtroom. "Listen, I don't care if this is real or not. You are going to pay me, or I'll ruin your life." An audible gasp rippled through the gallery. Brenda's skin flushed purple, and she looked like she wished the floor would open up and swallow her whole. Judge Stone didn't let the moment go to waste. "Well, Ms. Walsh," she said, her voice heavy with sarcasm, Apparently you would say such a thing, because you just did and we all heard it. The room buzzed with whispers. Brenda had just perjured herself in the most humiliating and public way possible. What came next was nothing short of a legendary judicial takedown. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," Judge Stone began, her words cutting with precision. "You fabricated an entire HOA, created phony documents on your home printer, hired fake enforcers to intimidate residents, scammed $50,000 out of frightened neighbors and expected the court to believe this was a legitimate business?" Each sentence landed like a blow. Brenda seemed to shrink in her seat with every word. The audience could hardly contain their laughter, and even members of the court staff were struggling to keep straight faces. But Judge Stone was only getting started. "In my 2 decades on the bench," she said, "I've seen every type of fraud imaginably: Ponzi schemes, elaborate insurance scams, complex financial cons. But this," she said, gesturing toward the pile of forged documents, "this is by far the most pathetic criminal enterprise I've ever encountered." The gallery erupted into spontaneous applause. For several seconds, the judge let it continue before restoring order. Brenda, now visibly falling apart, tried to interrupt with incoherent babbling, but Judge Stone didn't flinch. "You're not just guilty of fraud, Ms. Walsh," she continued, "you're embarrassingly guilty. Your fake documents are riddled with spelling errors, your bylaws contradict themselves within the same paragraph, and you scheduled meetings on dates that don't even exist. You even claimed leadership from people who have been dead for years." The dissection continued with relentless force. The judge didn't miss a single inconsistency, every one of Brenda's lies unraveling in front of a rapt audience. "Did you really believe," she asked, "that printing documents on copy paper would make them legitimate, or that slapping a fake letterhead on threats would make them legal?" Then came the emotional punch. "Miss Walsh," she said, her tone shifting, "you preyed on elderly couples who worked a lifetime to save for retirement. You targeted single mothers trying to care for their kids. You harassed honest residents like Mr. Collins, who just wanted peace. You twisted the justice system into a weapon and used it to threaten people who trusted that official-looking letters actually meant something." The room was utterly silent. No one moved, no one breathed. Then came the sentencing. "Miss Walsh," Judge Stone said with finality, "you are found guilty of multiple counts of fraud, extortion, and perjury committed here in this courtroom. You are hereby sentenced to 18 months in county jail and ordered to repay $53,000 to your victims." But that wasn't all. "You are also permanently barred from creating, managing, or participating in any homeowners association or community group for the rest of your natural life." The gallery erupted in cheers and applause. Tears welled in my eyes. Justice had been served. Brenda, unable to contain herself, exploded in a full meltdown. She screamed about conspiracies and unfair treatment, declaring it all a lie. "This is a setup," she shrieked. "You're all against me." Judge Stone remained composed and slightly amused. "Bailiff," she said calmly, "please escort Miss Walsh directly to county jail to begin her sentence." As the bailiff moved in with cuffs, Brenda's shrieking continued, but no one was paying attention anymore. As she was dragged out of the courtroom, Judge Stone delivered a final remark that would become legend. "Well," she said with perfect comedic timing, "that was certainly more entertaining than daytime television." The courtroom erupted with laughter and applause. Even the court reporter cracked a smile. It was the perfect end to a perfect courtroom saga. Justice doesn't always come swiftly, but when it does, sometimes it comes with humor, grace, and a touch of poetic flair. That's all for today's story from Just Stories. If this tale of well-earned justice made you smile, go ahead and give it a like. I'm David, and we'll see you in the next one with another unbelievable true story. Until then, take care.